Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kermit Whitfield, CMC Board Member and Director of Communications for United Way of Central Ohio. It's great to see everyone today. Today, we are pleased to present Fueling Ohio's Future, featuring Nick Akins, interviewed by Columbus Business First's Tom Knox. The Fueling Ohio's Future series is presented by American Electric Power and Columbia Gas of Ohio, supported by Deloitte and Steptoe & Johnson, and presented in partnership with the OSU Office of Energy and Environment. Please help me thank our sponsors and partners. Now, please welcome John McEwen, Managing Partner of the Columbus Office of Deloitte, to introduce our speakers.
All right, thank you, Kermit. I can't believe no one's done this yet, but I'm going to say this. OH. I don't know about you. I'm still dragging a little bit. So Deloitte is pleased to support the mission of the Columbus Metropolitan Club to engage week after week the people, the ideas, and the conversation that's important to the vitality and the forward progress of our community. Today, we're pleased to hear from the leader of one of the largest electric utilities in the United States, serving over 5 million customers in 11 states, and headquartered right here in Columbus. His profile is in your pamphlet there, but a couple things. Nick is the chair or incoming chairman of the Edison Electric Institute. He is on the Energy and Environmental Committee of the U.S. Business Roundtable, and he's a musician, and he's also a member of the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. So please welcome the Chairman, President, and CEO of American Electric Power, Nick Akins. And interviewing Nick today is an able, energetic, and intelligent business reporter who wrote this introduction, who we are pleased to have join us. Please welcome Thomas Knox of Columbus Business First. Thomas, the show is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, John, and thanks to the Columbus Metro Club for asking me to interview Nick. I'm delighted to be here. AEP is a giant and important company here in Ohio and in Columbus and Gahanna as well. It's one of the biggest utilities, regulated utilities in the whole country, serves millions of residents and businesses. And if you read Columbus Business First, you'll notice that there's always news coming from them, so I enjoy that. They've been around for more than a century, yet Nick Akins is just their sixth CEO. So they've been a model of stability, but the power market is not very stable at the moment, especially in Ohio. The entire energy industry is in the midst of change and great innovation, and I've got a lot of questions for Nick, probably more than we'll get to today. So with that, we'll get into it, Nick.
Thank you, Tom. Yep.
Start off with, I'd like to address the most recent bit of news, which is that AEP had used Goldman Sachs to explore purchasing 8,000 or so megawatts of energy, or to help sell 8,000 megawatts worth of power plants, most of them in Ohio. So can you explain to people why you guys are thinking about that and what it means for ratepayers and businesses as well?
Sure, and I'll clarify a little bit about that. There was nothing intentional in terms of timing. We were actually surprised by a Deal.com article that came out relative to our hiring of Goldman Sachs. We had already hired them. We were in the process. We've been in the process for a period of time. Been very public about that in terms of our evaluation of the options relative to our unregulated generation, which was precipitated by deregulation in Ohio. We needed to come out and respond to that, obviously, because from an investor perspective, we had to respond something other than no comment. And obviously, there's an employee aspect of that as well, because employees at these power plants certainly are very knowledgeable and very thoughtful about what their future may hold. But we want to make sure we communicate with them with a degree of sincerity and make sure they understand what's going on as well. So our business, we're a regulated utility. We're in 11 states. Most of our jurisdictions, our state jurisdictions, are regulated in that we have the generation, transmission, and distribution. The only two states that we have that are unregulated, a portion of Texas, which had gone through deregulation around 2000, had gone through deregulation there, and we only own predominantly wires, transmission and distribution facilities in that portion of Texas. We still have an integrated utility portion of Texas that's also regulated that we continue to own and operate generation. So once Ohio moved to deregulation, it was clear that we had to make decisions about what to do with our generation. One thing is for certain, the market is not really operating properly when you value generation. And that was one of the concerns that we had going into deregulation. I think one of the policy issues that, frankly, that Ohio needs to deal with relative to the ability for the market to send proper price signals for people to invest in new generation. I can tell you in Ohio, there's not much development of new generation because we're depending upon a market construct. It's really a regulatory construct that provides price signals for generation, and that has been woefully inadequate. There's a lot of work being done, but certainly it introduces volatility in energy markets, and also in particularly capacity markets that benefit base load generation, the 24/7 type of generation that runs all during the year, and in fact is really precious during this time of year when you have weather extremes. So we're in the process of evaluating the options relative to that generation, which includes keeping the generation if we can do two things. One is to be able to take the volatility out of the market so that we can invest, and to be able to see long term, because when you make these investments, our industry is the most heavily capitalized industry in the nation. We spend $80 billion a year on infrastructure in this area, and over the next decade and a half, we have about $2 trillion that we need to spend on just infrastructure development. So heavily capitalized, a lot of long-term thinking in terms of where resources go. You have to have adequate price signals over the long term so you can invest in those types of assets. So I think when Ohio went to deregulation, there was assumption that kind of construct would work properly. In fact, it hasn't, and that's a concern of ours. So we're going through the options, determining whether we keep the facilities, whether we sell the facilities, or whether we spin, merge. All those classic M&A options are available to us, but it's something that our board is certainly having to review, because our investors are primarily long-term investors. They're institutional investors that are in there for the long term. They're also a huge portion, 25% is retail investors, and a lot of people that invest in our company depend upon the dividend and depend upon that regular income stream that's coming in. So the stability of our stock price is representative of the stability of the business itself. And in the case of unregulated generation, typically in the entire market, it's very volatile, and that's not what our shareholders want.
You've not been shy about voicing concerns about potential brownouts or other issues because AEP is going to have to retire a lot of coal generation in the next couple of years. A lot of your opponents think that AEP is just crying wolf. Can you respond to that and explain your concerns about why you think there could be issues with reliability?
Yes. I'll respond initially, I'm right. But I think the main issue is, 2 years ago when the EPA went down the road of requiring the retirements of, essentially retiring a large amount of the generation in this country, 25% of the coal fleet in this country will get retired as a result of the mercury rules that were put in place. And the question is whether it's being done too quickly. Well, 2 years ago, we were the first out of the block, AEP, saying there's going to be an issue with the system itself, particularly during these times of like the polar vortex that we had, and even during this period of cold weather that we have now. That generation is dependent upon to run 24/7 baseload generation, and it's a critical component of what keeps the reliability of the grid what it is. So we were the first to say we're going to have issues, and now, 2 years later, fast forward, the regional transmission organization that's responsible for reliability in the region is asking units if they could run longer, generating units if they can run longer, because they see issues coming up in the winter, in particular the summer and winter of next year. We're retiring about 6,000 megawatts of coal-fired capacity in May of 15. That's about, in total, 7,500 megawatts. We've already retired some, but that's about 25% of the coal fleet that we own. And it happens to be about 25% of the coal fleet in the country that will retire as well. You can't retire that much generation that quickly and have impact and not have impacts on the system, because it takes years to put transmission facilities in place. It takes years to get through regulatory processes in the state jurisdictions to get approvals to build, whether it's permits, whether it's actual approvals for recovery of costs. You have to give states the amount of time necessary to evaluate what resources need to be put in place. And then this system was built over the last, AEP is 107 years old, so the electric system's been around a long time to get to the point that it is today. To start taking components out without a rational view of the timing it takes to make adequate decisions on replacing that capacity with something else, that really causes problems for the national power grid. So now you have it further aggravated by 111D, which is the Clean Power Plan, the President's Clean Power Plan. Very aggressive schedules are being proposed. There's 2020 targets for reduction of CO2 emissions. There's 2030 targets for reductions. Our big issue, and I think the industry's big issue, as well as over 26 of the states, is that we don't have time with the 2020 targets, and we will force more retirements of generation. And in fact, our studies show that the utility system will not be able to operate. That takes a long time that's a pretty hard thing to say, because we've had a very reliable grid for decades and decades, and the American economy is built upon the ability to flip the light switch and the power and energy is there. That is at risk, not only with the upcoming retirements we have in 15, but also as a result of 111D.
So if the timeline is too aggressive, what would be a better timeline for you
Yeah,
guys?
I think certainly 2030 targets, those types of targets can still remain in place, because it takes about probably 2 to 3 years to get through the state processes in terms of evaluation of different types of resources. And then for a typical gas-fired plant, which a lot of it will probably move toward natural gas and renewables, natural gas will take roughly 2 to 3 years. Certainly a coal plant, no, I don't think anyone's going to build a coal plant in this framework, but that takes about 7 years, and a nuclear unit takes between 10 and 15 years. So if you're thinking about additional resources to replace it, you've got to have those targets that measure up against what the replacement is. Our view, too, is transmission. We can put some transmission facilities in place to optimize the grid, but at the same time, that takes a long time. The last 765 kV that we were building, the major 765 kV project, took 14 years. It took 12 years to get the permit and 2 years to build it. So those are the kinds of things that you actually run into when you're trying to reevaluate what the grid will actually do. So it's a particular challenge, but I think the real issue is the 2020 target.
One of the bigger stories in energy in Ohio last year was Senate Bill 310, which put the freeze for 2 years on the state's renewable standards. American Electric Power was one of the bigger, more vocal supporters of that bill. This comes at a time when a Harvard study just came out that said Americans are overwhelmingly supportive of renewables compared to coal and natural gas. Now I know you can't just switch to renewables, it wouldn't happen wholesale, but why did AEP support that bill so much, and what led to that?
So we have pretty substantial energy efficiency programs that we've been working through and actually have worked very positively with the commission and customers on. We'd like to continue that, but the real issue is how do you evaluate the cost of energy efficiency components relative to other resources? And what we were really arguing for was the ability for the Commission and others to determine what is the right approach. Because, and I don't mean to be pejorative here, but we have a lot of states and a lot of legislators during election season that like to outdo each other. And if one state comes up with 25%, then another state's going to be 30, and now you have California at 50. They want to go to 50. So in meantime, the real case around renewables, there's a limitation to that, and there's a limitation to energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, has done a study, and energy efficiency can only get you around, for the entire amount of load that we have, on the order of around 3%. And typically that's marginal. But it's really good to do because it avoids the need for your next central station generation, which that's a challenge for us in the future, obviously. So I would think that it has to be balanced. It has to be a balanced energy approach that includes energy efficiency, that includes renewables, but also recognizes the value of the other resources that are being brought to the table. And the Commission is in the best place to be able to evaluate that. So yes, we were supportive of it. I don't think we were the lead company on it. But at the same time, we want to make sure that there's adequate analysis and review so that we're making wise decisions. If you think about, if we have $2 trillion of requirements that we need to spend on the electric grid over the next decade and a half, you want to be as efficient and optimize that as much as possible. So we have to make very rational decisions about how far we go, and then measure the benefits against the cost, and continue advancing in a very efficient and positive way. So,
as I said, renewables aren't going to completely replace traditional fuels anytime soon, but AEP uses renewables, and it's a sort of inevitable that they're going to increase in usage as the price goes lower. So how does AEP, as just a giant company, so sort of coexist with the incoming renewables and alternative energy with your existing?
Yeah, so there's an assumption out there that the utilities aren't doing anything relative to renewables, when in fact the utilities are building more renewables than anyone else. AEP has 2,000 megawatts of renewables. We do the purchase power arrangements that make those renewables possible. We're not the developer of them. We actually outsource those to contractors that build the facilities and own the facilities, but we have the purchase power arrangements that allow them to go to the bank and get recovery of these types of investments. We're also investing in centralized solar. We have centralized solar, a PPA for centralized solar here in Ohio for one facility, and then we're in Indiana and Michigan. We're also doing that as well. So we're very focused on achieving that transformation that needs to occur. But there's some sense of balance associated with that. If you see what's going on in Germany, in Spain, and the European areas, they're having particular challenges with operations of their grid as a result of the introduction of too much intermittent renewables. And they're also having societal impacts where people are having to choose between having electricity or not, because the feed-in tariffs, the benefits coming back from the government have become so excessive that it's become a particular challenge. So there's a lot of issues that we need to get through in that approach. One thing I want to just bring up, though, most people don't realize the difference between capacity and energy. Capacity is what we need to meet any demand at any particular time. Energy is the amount of kilowatt hours that you'll take over a month or a year or whatever. And you'll hear a lot about something being served 100% renewables. Renewables are intermittent. They don't supply when you need it most of the time, but nevertheless the energy is particularly valuable. So you have to keep in mind that if someone says, and I've heard this recently, a certain battery manufacturing plant where it's going to be served 100% renewables, and really they're still connected to the grid. They're connected to the grid because they need the capacity to be able to run the plant, and they also need and I hate to go this far, but reactive power, but it's people's eyes gloss over when I talk about this, but it is a component. It's sort of like if you ever been in a hotel room and everyone turns their shower on at the same time, and the shower pressure is not that good, and you just sort of get upset because it's like somebody with a sprinkler on, and it takes you a lot longer to shower. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't have the reactive power to go along with the real power that renewables provide, then you lose pressure on the system, which that's voltage. So then you see voltage sags, and the system start to respond negatively, and your clocks run slower, and all kinds of things, bad things happen. So that's what we want to avoid. Long question to a short. Long answer to a short question. I know. I get carried away on some of these things.
Oil and gas drilling in Ohio has helped the eastern part of the state. It's helped gasoline prices for everyone else. It's natural gas. I know AEP is shifting more to instead of coal because of the regulations. So can you just talk generally and specifically about the impacts of shale gas on AEP? I know it's helping with your industrial sales, but just overall as a company producing power, I mean, how is that going to change American Electric Power in the coming years?
Yeah, so historically, the reason why AEP was predominantly coal-fired in the eastern part of our footprint, in the Midwest states, is because natural gas really wasn't very prevalent. And then all of a sudden, you had major pipeline capacity coming in from different parts of the country, and then even beyond that, you had the shale gas revolution that enabled natural gas to be prevalent in this part of the country. So it became a bona fide resource that we could start to transition to. We bought about 5,000 megawatts of distressed generation assets and put that natural gas-fired capacity in place that's running today. We started that transformation, and it enabled us to continue to retire coal-fired units and to put natural gas facilities in place. So today, you have really a lot of natural gas that's available at very cheap prices. The question is, can you depend upon it 24/7 because of pipeline characteristics? The pipeline system has not caught up with the shale gas activity. So it's important for us to get the infrastructure in place so it becomes really a pretty substantial resource for us in the future as we make the transition from coal to other resources. So very definitely a positive for Ohio. I think probably, in my opinion, one of the travesties is that we haven't been able to take advantage of it. I can tell you that if there were adequate price signals for the building of new capacity, generation would get built here in Ohio. But as it stands now, it's not going to get built because Ohio is sitting like the hole in the middle of a donut. The other states around us are primarily regulated. They have integrated resource plans that they know what they're going to invest in. They have the price signals through regulations that tells them they can build. That doesn't exist here in Ohio. And it's unfortunate because the Utica gas shale is significant for Ohio, as Eagleford and the other areas have been significant throughout our service territory. Our service territory is really built around many of the shale gas plays that are in place today, and we're seeing benefits from an economy perspective. I mean, certainly the growth, the commercial growth in particular, and the industrial growth in Ohio and in that portion of Texas has been very positive for AEP.
AEP, you talked about deregulation, and I know you have various issues with it here in Ohio, but this is one of your bigger sources of revenue in Ohio. So how do you operate, being that this is your home state and you're in an environment that the company just doesn't like? You guys prefer regulated, so how do you sort of operate?
I think an unregulated market can work if you have the proper construct in place to support it, and that doesn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean it won't exist at some point, but it certainly doesn't exist today. We continue to invest heavily in our transmission and our distribution here in Ohio, and really, when you think about it in the future, a lot of the resources may actually be placed at the distribution level with distributed generation, certainly with solar activity and others. I think it's important for us to start focusing on that infrastructure development and the customer experience, and that's what we're doing. And we're not having to spend and not spending on generation here in Ohio. That is a problem for the future, and something that we're trying to fix today, but there's challenges with that as well.
So if it's a problem in the future, I mean, how far in the future will it take to become a problem? And then what happens if it's too much of a problem for you?
It's already a problem. There are people that work for my company that have been there for 40 years, and they've never seen a situation where Ohio, and let alone AEP's portion of Ohio, is short of capacity. We do not have enough capacity in the state of Ohio to serve AEP or the state's load. That's not a good place to be. That means you're importing capacity and energy from states around you, and that's something that really does need to get fixed. And there's no excuse for it given the resources available to Ohio today, with not only with nuclear, with coal, with renewables that are being put in place, natural gas definitely. If we were still in a regulated market here, we would have already been investing in natural gas facilities in this state, but that's not the case, and we're waiting on a price mechanism through the Regional Transmission Organization and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that actually works, and that hasn't happened yet.
But aren't there in Eastern Ohio being some gas plants being built right now? I mean, why can't you? Can you elaborate on why you think that the company can't build any?
Yeah, there's a lot that are announced, and when you look at the queue of new resources, many people announce these things, but once you get through the permitting and actually building, that's a different story.
Why is it?
Because you need bank financing to do that. You've got to be able to go to a bank and say, okay, I'm going to invest. For a natural gas-fired plant, you're probably talking about a $700 million investment. You're going to go to a bank and say, well, I don't know what the market's going to do, but I want to borrow $700 million to build this power plant. That doesn't work very well. I mean, you've got to be able to go to a bank and say, I've got a revenue stream, and I'd say at least 7 years to be able to invest in that kind of capacity. Now, the only ones, in my opinion, that will do that are ones who have investors and usually low credit quality that are willing to take that chance and are really making a bet on natural gas prices.
Switching gears a little bit, utilities I think are decent economic indicators because you guys kind of see and forecast what your power usage is going to be, especially for industrial and heavy users. So for 2015, I mean, what are you guys forecasting, and how is it different, or is it different than 2014?
Yeah, so we're actually feeling more positive about our forecast. And some of this I really can't talk about because we haven't released fourth quarter earnings. But one of the things at the end of third quarter we were seeing is industrial is particularly advancing on the order of, if you take out Ormet, and if you remember the Ormet situation, a large facility that went bankrupt, if you take that out, you're really seeing on the order of 3.5% to 4.5% increase in industrial load, which is really good. Commercial and residential is a little bit slower because we're waiting on the 20-year-olds to move out of the house and find jobs and build a home. But part of it is that whenever you have an industrial renaissance and the industrial continues to grow with some sense of advancement in a positive direction, eventually buildings will start to flourish. That's our commercial customers. And then as more industrial and commercial customers get built, the residential will follow because people will move where the jobs are. And to the reverse, it goes the other direction. If industrial start to decline, and it's a sustained decline, then you'll eventually see the supporting businesses, which on the commercial side, start to deteriorate, and then residential will deteriorate once people realize I can't find a job here. So that's what happened at the end of 08. when we started that process through the economic downturn. So now today, as of third quarter, we're seeing industrial continue several quarters in a row of industrial improvement, and then commercial is starting to improve as well. And residential is essentially flat, but we expect that to continue to improve as well. So from an economic standpoint, we look at 10 different types of components of the economy. 8 of the 10 components have been increasing, particularly as it relates to shale gas counties. Our shale gas counties year over year have increased in terms of on the order of around 30 to 38%. And it's really driving pipe manufacturers, petrochemicals, those types of activities that are ancillary businesses. So our chemical activity continues to increase as well. The one that hasn't increased is mining, and you probably can figure that part out with the coal mines going offline. But the other components are picking up pretty significantly.
I think you touched on this on the first question with Goldman, but the power purchase agreements is another huge story that should be resolved pretty shortly. It's just 2,700 megawatts, I believe, right now that you guys are looking at. But I think the worry that some people have is that if this happens, then it's going to be sort of a slippery slope, and then eventually every Ohio utility is going to have asked the PUCO, can we do this? And then it's kind of going back to re-regulation. So if this does get approved by the PUCO, it sounds like you guys might keep those plants, but I mean, what's going to happen after that? It seems like this could be a sort of precursor going back to what it was before 2000.
Really the decision process for the commission and the state, it's really a state policy decision that needs to be made. We believe legally it can be done, that you can have purchase power arrangements with essentially customers to mitigate the impacts of price spikes that occur. And let me just say why we're doing it. Okay, there's 2 reasons. One is, first of all, we're not getting the support from the market. Now, keep in mind, I use market loosely. It's a regulatory construct that doesn't really operate like a market. But you're not getting the revenue to support baseload generation, particularly nuclear and coal-fired facilities. The other part of it is Ohio customers are pretty much unhedged. I mean, they're naked in terms of the energy prices that occur. And that's not a good place to be. I mean, you purchase stock where there's a balanced portfolio. You buy fuel where there's a balanced portfolio, where you have fixed versus variable type of cost structures. And right now, Ohio, notwithstanding the transition that we're currently going through toward deregulation, we have a transition where AEP is providing the capacity and with rate structures to support it until mid-15. Mid-15 it runs out, and that means that whatever the market bears is what the market will provide. So in the context of retiring generation, we're retiring 25% of the coal fleet and state retirements as well. And at a time where I know natural gas prices are low right now, but when those units retire, natural gas prices are going to come up, and then you're also susceptible to extreme cold weather events. So just keep in mind, during the polar vortex, our customers were still supported by that transition mechanism, so they didn't see the true impacts. And during that time, most customers pay around, on average, total bills around 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, that's about it's about $10 per megawatt hour. Well, the pricing during the polar vortex went to $1,800 a megawatt hour. So you can imagine how customers would have reacted with that kind of pricing flowing through to their bills at a point in time where they're already using a lot of electrical energy just because, by virtue of it's cold outside. So that could be a tremendous impact for our customers, particularly those that are on fixed incomes and that kind of thing. So it's only logical that you have some layer of the portfolio that is somehow, I use it loosely, fixed, but it's tied to resources that can hedge the cost for those future price spikes. Now it's up to the commission, up to the state of Ohio, how much hedging occurs. But we're saying that there needs to be some level of hedging to protect customers in the future. There is no doubt that rates will go up. There's no doubt in my mind that natural gas prices will go up, and I think that's a pretty substantial issue for Ohio customers.
In a few minutes, we'll be going to the Q&A portion of today. But until then, I have one more question, and I'll just lob up a softball for you. What's the biggest issue for AEP, do you think, in 2015, and specifically here in Ohio?
Yeah, in 2015 here in Ohio is the purchase power arrangement issue and the disposition of what we do with our unregulated generation. That's the two key issues, and we need a policy direction from Ohio to understand which direction we're going to go. Because, I mean, we're big boys, we can take it. Just tell us what the answer is. But it's pretty important for us to know how to invest, particularly in the generation part of Ohio. Transmission, distribution, all those types of things will continue to flourish in Ohio from AEP's perspective. I mean, Ohio is a big part of AEP, and it will continue to be a big part of AEP.
So just to follow up, if the PUCO does not approve this, I mean, what's the worst case scenario then? I mean, is it just selling the plants? Is that?
Yeah, I think now I'm not going to sit here and say we're selling our assets, because that's a key issue that we have to get through with our board, but you have to see certain policy directions, and keep in mind what I said early on. Our investors expect continuity. They don't like surprises. They don't like volatility. And when our investors are expecting that, then we've got to see a market mechanism that truly produces that and the ability to invest. And right now, you have too much volatility. So we're looking for a couple of things. One is, from the purchase power arrangement perspective, Ohio needs to answer from a policy direction what it wants to do. And then we have market proposals that are changing within PJM and the federal government that would affect how bidding occurs for baseload generation. Those are the kinds of things that we need to know and understand before making decisions relative to our assets.
All right, well, with that, it's 1 o'clock now, so we'll start the audience Q&A section. If you have a question, you can step up to the mic and ask Nick. And please,
Thank you for coming today. My name is Scott Whitlock.
Hi, Scott.
You've talked about 2030. Could you describe what you expect the baseload capacity to look like in 2030? What kind of technologies we'll be using for it? And when you speak of baseload, do you mean capacity available 24/7?
Right.
What kind of technologies, and do you expect any of it to be renewables, such as hydro, wood chips, and that sort of thing?
Okay, absolutely. In 2030, we should see, in my mind, a more balanced portfolio. That's one of the positives, because I think we are moving toward access to renewables. We're making decisions around coal-fired generation. Natural gas certainly has become more prevalent within this country. So, and then technology itself is moving very quickly. I mean, we look at transmission as a resource, because transmission optimizes the entire grid, so you don't have to build a lot of power plants. And then secondly, the technology at the distribution end with distributed generation, and we have all kinds of mechanisms we now use with technology and data flow that enable us to change the grid to drive substantial efficiencies in the grid itself. So all those things will come into play. And in my opinion, to make an investment in a 60 or 80-year life central station generation is not a wise thing to do at this point, because technology is moving very, very quickly. But keep in mind, it's moving quickly on all fronts of the resources available to us. And I think it's a mistake for this country not to take advantage of the multiple sets of resources that we have. Coal will remain a part of the 2030 portfolio. Lesser extent, my guess is on the order of 30% as opposed to 50%. But as far as renewables, that will certainly, if you ask what the investments being made now in new generation, it's natural gas and renewables. And then the technology space is being brought into it as well. So I would see particular advances in that area. 2030 will be very different. I mean, customers will be using energy differently with electric vehicles, with all those types of things. We see a further electrification of the economy, and it's going to be driving this multiple set of resources, not only at the utility end, but the user end as well. One of the big issues we have to deal with, just as a offset of that, is the infrastructure development itself. Our system has been built one way. I mean, it's been built with a system that says, okay, this is the generation, and it's going to use the wires to get it to the load. Now we have to have bidirectional type of flows from the customer into the grid, and the grid becomes more of an enabler. I hate the it's sort of anomalous to the cloud, I suppose, but it is an investment that needs to be made in the grid so that we can have bidirectional activity to optimize energy flow in this country. If you think about it, you have a lot of asset management within buildings, and we're also optimizing on the utility side, but they don't talk to each other very well. And you see that coming together in a very real sense.
Well, this question is sort of a segue from that. I'm a former home builder, and I still get construction trade journals, and I see more and more articles about deep retrofits and zero energy homes. Mm-hmm. Is this a pattern that's on your radar screen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, energy efficiency is a key part of that is a resource for the future, because that enables us not to invest in large central station generation, but energy efficiency will continue to be driven not only in appliances, but also how you use appliances. If Americans get used to information flow occurring in their home where appliances can be controlled, which I know some households don't like that. They think Big Brother's watching. But a lot of appliances already have that capability. If you're able to address systems, and that's what our smart grid pilot was all about here in Ohio, was really focused on that kind of flow to improve efficiency of the entire grid. So, and housing efficiency continues to improve. I mean, you see it in appliances, you see it in building materials, and also you see it as a society moving to smaller homes and even urban homes that you see in the younger population today. So it's changing dramatically.
My name is Jim Cowan. I'm with Viridian Energy. We're wind-generated electricity here in Ohio. And I see the governor just signed SB 310. And as I understand it, part of that has to do with tightening up the requirements to install wind and solar energy. Is that correct? And could you address that, please?
Yeah, so when you think about the introduction of intermittent resources, there has to be requirements on how you control those resources, because typically resources are it can't be a system where at any given time you only get power when you don't need it, or you get power when you need it. I mean, there is wind power out there today. If you think of it from an energy perspective, is very low priced. We continue to enter into purchase power arrangements for wind power if they're done in the right areas with the right capacity factor and it's done properly. But the interface between these resources, since they are intermittent, is certainly important, because the grid has to be able to respond to that. We have, and Germany, as I mentioned earlier, is seeing this pretty dramatically, where they have a substantial amount of renewable resources, but really what's backing up the renewable resources is the fossil fueled units, and that's why they're bringing on more coal, which is probably not good for their climate change activities that are occurring in Europe. But it's a necessity. So each kind of resource has its place. Wind power certainly has its place from an energy standpoint, and it provides very valuable energy rates for customers. But you also have to be able to make sure that 24/7 capability is still there to support the grid. So, and wind power will continue to flourish. I don't think there's any question about that. I'm sorry? Wind power will continue to flourish. Yep.
I'm Ted Jeffrey, we used to mine a lot of coal, but and this may be a dumb question, but if you take coal out of the picture, where do you store energy that you're going to need when the demand for energy goes up? You can't do it with gas. I mean, you can, but you can liquefy it, but that's expensive, and I don't think you can do it with nuclear, and maybe batteries will come along or something, but is that a dumb question, Nick?
No, you're just saying the same thing I'm thinking. I mean, coal can't be replaced by the American economy. And there will still be the need for coal-fired generation, and that's why, we actually supported the Waxman-Markey legislation that was climate change legislation, because it provided technological development dollars to improve the carbon capture aspects of coal-fired generation. And you're going to still see coal be a part of the portfolio, but the natural occurrence is to move to resources that have less risk, resources that are there to provide, from an overall sense, a balanced energy portfolio. So natural gas will be a part of that, but you're exactly right. It's limited because usually in cold weather like this, natural gas taps will freeze up, or LDCs like Columbia Gas will have first call on natural gas before boiler fuel. Those are the kinds of trade-offs that have to be made. The resiliency of the grid is only defined by its underlying infrastructure. And we know we have the infrastructure that includes coal, it includes natural gas, it includes renewables and across the board, but the more you change that, the more you're changing the resiliency of the grid. And we have to be mindful of what natural gas provides, what nuclear provides, what coal provides, what renewables provides, and energy efficiency, what it provides. That's one of the biggest challenges of educating Congress and others on what we need relative to an energy policy in this country, which we obviously don't have.
Hi, yes, Andy Campbell, thank you for being here. I won't ask you the science fiction question. Well, I won't ask the moon one in China. I'm curious, when you're talking about power generation, you're mostly talking about big plants, 750 megawatts and up. What about the in-between, the energy efficient home, and I'm specifically talking about fuel cells, and I think they can generate in the area of 10 megawatts, and having lots of those instead of single giant plants out by the river. Is that part of the equation for AEP?
Absolutely. I mean, you're starting to move to more distributed generation assets. The question is the cost of that versus central station generation. There's a place for both, but I believe distributed generation will continue, and microgrids, which enable many of those aspects, will continue to advance. I don't think there's any question about that, because number one, I mean, the risk of investing and building a large central station generation is difficult to do in this time and day. I mean, to build a new nuclear plant is about $7 billion, and the market cap of AEP is around $30 billion. So you're sort of betting the company on an investment that anything could happen around the world during a 15-year construction cycle, and you're just pretty much blown out of the water. So you have to have substantial state and legislative support to build those kinds of assets. So it's going to drive you really more toward those distributed resources. And I frankly believe that as technology advances, it'll be the primary way to go, because customers in the future will have a sense of certainty around their supply the more distributed it becomes.
Yes, my name is John McKnight. I work for Rife's Auto Body here in Columbus. How much consideration does AEP give to the environmental impact that producing the different forms of energy
Yeah.
has? And how much do you use your strength to put pressure on the different energy producers out there to lessen the harm that they do to the environment when they are producing the energies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So when we do any evaluation of new generation, we include the carbon footprint, we include the other environmental activities associated with it. So we actually evaluate those resources from that perspective. Now, keep in mind, we spent $7.2 billion over the last few years just putting scrubbers and SCRs to remove SOx, NOx, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and also mercury out of our power plants. And we've done a pretty incredible job of that. So if you look at the amount of mercury removal, that continues to progress because you have sort of an 85% co-benefit of scrubbers and SCRs that take out sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides. Those kinds of things continue to advance, and we're making a lot of advancement there. As far as the environmental footprint itself, we continue to invest heavily in moving toward renewables. Natural gas certainly has less carbon emissions, but we're very mindful of the decisions we make relative to a clean energy environment, and that's where everyone is trying to get. Matter of fact, even for coal-fired generation, we put in the first ultra supercritical coal unit in this country that reduced carbon emissions by 15% and was also 15% more efficient than any coal unit in the country. That was for coal. And then for other technologies we continue to advance, we're investing heavily in transmission to optimize the grid so we don't have to add as many resources, and that's been very positive as well. And we have a sustainability program that we've met for the last 6 years with the environmental community, with different aspects of the environmental community, get their input on what it is we need to be doing to achieve it, and also educating in the process, and it's been very valuable to us.
All right, great questions, and we're going to turn over to Kermit now for his final thoughts.
Great, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed today's forum. Remember that you can view and share all of our forums on CTV, Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Once more, thanks to our presenting sponsors, AEP and Columbia Gas of Ohio, sponsors Deloitte and Steptoe and Johnson, and our partners, the OSU Office of Energy and the Environment. And thanks to our speakers, Nick Akins and Tom Knox. And thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you again at CMC.